Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here, and those far away,
time we share with love and care. We give thanks for this precious day. Thanks, Dick. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manhattan. My name is Sarah Desmet, and I'll be your convener today. Our pastor, Dr. Isabel Call, is on a much needed respite after the battery of significant holidays that we just went through. She will return to the pulpit next Sunday. I'd like to welcome all here in the sanctuary on Zinedale Road and all of those on Zoom, hosted by Karen Hummel. We have a brief announcement before we get into the bulk of the program. Mark, would you like to?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Mark Mayfield, and I'm here on behalf of what has been named the Call Process Task Force. And you've heard from us once before, I believe, in here, but I'm here to provide you with an update on what's going on. First of all, I want to apologize for the time that's passed without an update from us. Things have been a little crazy, but we want to give you some information now. So to provide a little background, first of all, Pastor Isabel's contract, initial contract included specific language that indicated our shared intent to move towards a relationship of call. This is quoted from her contract, whereby the congregation and the minister covenant to an indefinite ministry together. That's sort of the background of our calling, so to speak. The contract also stipulated that the process should begin in the fall of 2022 and would ideally conclude by December. That calendar became clearly somewhat unrealistic as we progressed. We considered how and where we would solicit input and feedback from the congregation, and we drafted a set of questions. But we also lost our initial chair, Rob DeLong, who moved to another place and a new job. And so it set us back a little. So at that point, I stepped in and replaced Rob, and then so we're considering a new schedule. So what is our timeline? So Pastor Isabel's contract was originally set to expire on July 31st, 2023, but that sort of set this process in her contract, the schedule that you see there, the way it was. And logistically, that made for a really tight timeline. So the more we talked amongst ourselves, we realized between the chair, Amy Betts, and with Pastor Isabel, we realized it didn't need to be that crunched. So all parties decided it would be helpful to have more time, not just more time for the task force to do its work, but also for Pastor Isabel to establish her ministry, and more time for our members to get to know her, given that we haven't been in sort of normal situation for a long time now, and learn about her work as well. So, as such, the board voted to extend her contract for another year. Through this, actually, that's through December 2023, if I understand correctly. Doing that removed the pressure to make the decision quite as quickly. And so at this point, we're planning to revising the schedule and to have a Sunday program that occurs in the coming weeks to educate the congregation about the process and how we're going to carry it out and what it means to have a called minister. We're hoping to have an invited guest at that time during that program who will also give us an outside perspective on called ministry. After that, we're going to engage the members in the process by soliciting your input and feedback towards the end of making a final recommendation, basically on whether to call Pastor Isabel to the membership at the annual meeting in April. So we hope to have this whole process concluded by April, and thank you for your bearing with us on the timeline. So please look for details in the coming weeks and feel free to ask me about this. We'll have this announcement in the newsletter as well, so you can see it there with contact information. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. UUFM is a diverse, evolving spiritual community acting for a better world. That's how we see ourselves as a congregation. Our vision is to be a vibrant, inclusive congregation widely known as a safe haven and a force for social justice. I believe we agree that civil rights are human rights. As Unitarian Universalists, we do not have a creed. From the UUA website, I read, "We do affirm and promote 7 principles which we hold as strong values and moral guides, not dogma or doctrine. At the center of the principles is love. We live out these principles within a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience." At UUFM, our services often follow a monthly theme. This month, our theme is Finding Our Center. The path to finding our heart, our identity, our moral compass, our purpose, and our dreams, all that defines how we show up in this world in this form. This Sunday, the Sunday before Martin Luther King Jr. Day, or what others call the third Monday of January. Today, January 15th, is Martin Luther King Jr.'s actual birthday, as many of you reminded me. He was born on a Tuesday in 1929, January 15th. He was assassinated on Thursday, April 4th, 1968, by an agency of the US government, we believe. It has been proven. In 1979, proposals were first put forward to commemorate the civilian martyr with a federal holiday. In the South, the holiday was conflated with Robert E. Lee's birthday, January 19th. In Arkansas, until 2017, that was the case. The northern states called it Civil Rights Day for a long time. New Hampshire was the last to fully adopt the name MLK Day in the year 2000. And here we are. I'd like to acknowledge that most of us are here because colonialism. We know this fact. I believe I know this fact because the disgrace was brought into the conversation overtly, without reservations, without discretion. We chose to remember, we choose to remember, and remind others to listen. I'd like to share a poem by Joy Harjo. She is the 3-time Poet Laureate of the United States, the only person to hold that position for 3 years. I'll read her poem, Remember, from 1983. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn that is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away to night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father, he is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, green earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, the trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember. I'll now light the chalice. Those on Zoom, please light your own chalices at home and join us in the sanctuary. I share a reading now from Erica Hewitt, Bold and Courageous Together. It's time now. I invite you to listen. The word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. According to the poet Mark Nepo, the original use of the word courage meant to stand by one's core, a striking concept that reinforces the belief found in almost all traditions that living from the center is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer. To encourage means to hearten, to impart strength and confidence. This is our work as a religious community, to encourage one another, to be bold and engaging the world around us, as well as what scares us internally, to give one another the confidence and the heart to live as fully as possible. With full hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another, we recognize our agency and our connective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We light this chalice, symbol of all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will be. Our shared ministry encourages those within and beyond our walls. Now we'll have the time for all ages. Sandy, our religious education director, invites everyone, small and holding hands, masked and unmasked.
Carl, you want to sit in a chair with me? How's your reading these days? Have you learned how to read yet? Is that a yes or a no? How about you look at the pictures while I say what the words are, okay? We're going to read a story today called The Proudest Color by Sheila Modir and Jeff Kashow, with illustrations by Monica McKay. Are you ready? You can, if you don't want to look at the book, you can look at these pictures up here instead. Okay, you can see how well I do, all right? That's right. I am like a box of crayons, bright and colorful. I see and feel in color. When I am happy, I feel a rush of razzle-dazzle pink in my hands. When I am mad, I feel sparks of bright red spread across my cheeks. When I am sad, I feel a deep blue in my eyes. When I am nervous, I feel a vivid purple in my stomach. When I am proud, I feel a beautiful brown in my heart. But for me, brown is more than feeling proud. It's the color I see when I see me. It's the color that people see when I come into a room, get on the bus, or go to the store. It's the color on my arms, my toes, and my face. The night before my first day of school, my mom tucks me into bed and kisses my forehead. She says, "Sarah, you felt many different colors today, but your beautiful brown skin is here to stay. All those feelings come and go, but your brown skin glows and glows." I press my arm against my mom's, and I like seeing the differences and similarities in our shades of brown. What's your color? You're even lighter than me. On my first day of school, I feel razzle-dazzle pink happy and vivid purple nervous when my mom drops me off. But the people here are not like my box of crayons. They might have colorful feelings inside, but I am the only one who is brown on the outside. I stare at my brown arms and remember my mom's words. My brown skin glows and glows. I feel a rush of brown pride in my chest, and I march into my classroom, radiating sunshine, yellow confidence. At recess, my classmate Zoe presses her arm against mine, wrinkles her nose, and says, "You're so dark. I don't like brown." Everyone laughs. I stare at our arms and feel many colors swirl inside me. I feel bright red anger in my cheeks and deep blue sadness in my eyes. But I don't feel brown pride inside my chest. In that moment, I wish I wasn't brown on the outside. At dinner, I tell my parents what happened at school. My mom and Papa tell me that there are people who can be mean when they see my beautiful brown skin because it's different from their skin. But we want you to remember all the people who share your brown skin and all the important things they have done in this world. Brown is the color of your abuela. That's a grandma. Sure. It is. Do you know who's in the pictures up on the table in the right there? We'll figure it out here in a minute. I think it's someone different. Let's keep reading and see if we can figure it out. I stare at my brown arms and remember my mom's words. My brown skin glows and glows. I feel a rush of brown pride in my chest and march into my classroom, radiating. Wait a minute. Okay, I'm better now. Brown is the color of your abuela, who loves to hug and kiss you. It is the color of your old school principal. That must be this one. Who high-fived the students as he walked down the hallway. It is the color of your doctor, who helps you feel better when you are sick. It is the color of Martin Luther King Jr., who inspired America with his dream of equality. It is the color of Malala Yousafzai, Cesar Chavez, former President Barack Obama, and it is the color of Kamala Harris, who is the first woman to become vice president of our country and said she wouldn't be the last. So that's who I think those people were. As my parents tell me about each of these brown and beautiful people, I feel a rush of razzle-dazzle pink spread in my hands. Even though I might be the only kid with brown skin in school, I am part of a very special box of crayons. This box is full of amazing people from all around the world and all throughout history who are brown like me. No matter what Zoe says, my brown skin is important, and it's a color that makes a big difference in the world. It's the color that I am, and I will make a difference in the world. I see brown all over my skin. I feel brown fill my heart. I feel proud. And that's it. That's the end. There's a piece here in the back of the story that says that Zoe sends her a note. And it says, Dear Sahara, the teacher told me what I said was wrong and that brown is beautiful. I'm sorry. I was mean to you. And Zoe and Zara accepts Zoe's apology. Shall we go?
No.
You can take that back with you.
Trailer to the new Disney movie, The New Little Mermaid, came out. And the day it came out, in the videos, mothers were recording their daughters saying, "Mommy, the Little Mermaid is black. And Mommy, she's brown like me." Just how important representation is, being able to see yourself in the world as you are. Now is the time when we have the offering. Here at UUFM, the offering we receive on Sunday morning goes to a special organization that serves our community. Each month, this month, our Helping Hands recipient is the Project Excel, organized through Manhattan's University for Man. You can donate online by going to uufm.net, then clicking the donate button and choosing the particular fund to which you want to contribute. If you're here in person, you can put your offering in the basket in the back. Also, take time now to write your joys and concerns There are slips of paper in the back, and we can bring them around to you as well for you to write and let us know what you have to share with us today. On Zoom, go ahead and put your concerns and joys in the chat. We'll now listen to Renee Brown's selection for today. She recorded it for us. She is playing an arrangement of Naima by John Coltrane. Coltrane playing. Ah, I thought she had recorded herself, so we have the master himself. They say that a burden shared is halved and a joy shared is doubled. Today we have a joy from Ann Cowan. She says, my family is celebrating the adoption of my granddaughter Erin of Lexi, age 10 years. Never have there been so many tears of joy. That's wonderful news. Karen, did we have any joys or concerns in the Zoom?
The only thing we have is that Les and Nikki.
Guess what she's saying?
Can you hear me?
I know. Yeah, I have to unmute for us, Karen.
I'm not muted.
Ah.
We don't have any.
I'm joyful that we got the mute figured out. You look lovely this morning, Karen. Thank you so much for hosting on Zoom and you guys out there. Let's take a few moments to reflect. For the reflection today, Brice, Hobrock, and I have talked and had discussions about MLK and racism and how we're living our lives today in light of what has changed and what hasn't changed. Brice will begin.
Thank you. As a person of a certain age, it was rumored that I have had experiences that were relevant to today's subject, and thus I was asked to tell a story today. But in the process, of course, I got to thinking about it, and it expanded into much greater reflection about the status of things since Martin Luther King's day and during his day. Each of us has a history of how we learned and became what we are at a certain age. And every microsecond of our life is a conscious history of some sort, but as we string them all together throughout our lifetime, we put them together into stories. They have meaning, they come together, and we decide, well, maybe that experience would mean something to me and to others. This is not the first time I've been asked to speak at a Martin Luther King Day celebration. I was asked some years ago to speak at the African-American church in Northview, which at the time was handled by my good friend Jim Boyer, many of you remember as a distinguished faculty member at K-State. And he was not only a professor at K-State, he was also the minister, the organist, the choir leader, etc., at his church. Well, at that point, I told a story, and I'm not going to tell the same story today to you, but these are not confessions, they're just simply things that have happened in my lifetime that are meaningful. We remember Martin Luther King's contributions to equity. His main thing that was different probably was the fact that he preached nonviolence. He was a minister at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, as his father had been before him. And his appeal was based on nonviolence. As we look at history, we can only conclude that big change happens only with violence, through riots, revolutions, etc. And such things don't seem to have lasting effects. So Martin Luther King's approach was very different. His martyrdom on April 4th, 1968, in Memphis is one of those events that we remember if we were of the right age at that time. It lines up with many other things that had happened, some things that had happened before, like the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and unfortunately others to follow. If you were of a certain age, why you might remember this as also being equivalent to some of the other events, such as the dropping of the atomic bomb, the and 10/11, January 6th, 2021, etc. Well, Martin Luther King dreamed of the day when all men would lie down together and put aside their insignificant concerns about color. And as we learn, we know from DNA studies that we Homo sapiens, we thinking man creatures, are all the same. DNA tells us so. We are the same species, and color is an insignificant part of the genetic makeup that we all possess. But not everyone is equal. As we can imagine, each of us have an individual capacity to learn and to earn, so to speak. The question we need to ask, however, is, have we made progress in the last 55 years since King's death? His main concerns at the time were racism, poverty, militarism, economic and social justice, cultural decay, and political paralysis. Well, I think you have to answer yes, we have progressed. At the time of the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which King worked together with Lyndon Johnson on, there were 5 members of Congress that were African American. The tally this week, there are 60. So we see that there is progress being made. However, has there been progress in the hearts and minds of people? Well, it's questionable. Some of us maybe not. It still remains a concern. Today, we are faced with spiritual catastrophe, a corporate media multiplex, materialism, income equality still, inadequate housing for many, a popular culture that seems to be heartless, artificial intelligence, and other things that are added today, climate change, authoritarianism, unchecked population growth, pollution, diminishing resources, immigration, all of them related and of continuing concern. So it's really the lessons, I guess, that we learned from King that are still active with us today. Individual progress is made, in categorical progress is made, but we need to continue to progress with all of these things. The challenges are great. As I said, each of us has a personal history about how we learn about these things. For myself, I am of a certain age. I note that I have lived more than half the time since the American Civil War ended. My grandparents were born immediately after, the year after the Civil War. The soldiers all came home, you understand? And I knew my grandparents well up into the end of the 1950s. So I feel that I have a breadth of thinking about history back for more than 150 years, and a view of what has happened, and thus my own personal growth in all of this has been very important to me. The stories that I know of my own experience, I have included in my memoirs, and I'm going to tell you one of them today. So we need a revolution, and it does happen every time something occurs. We need to reconsider our values. Public life needs reinvigorating, especially after the pandemic. We need a transfer of power away from plutocrats and oligarchs, and we'll see how it goes. But now Sarah is going to come up here, and we're going to sit and possibly talk, and I'm going to tell a story. So it's just like a kid's story.
Going to hold this?
Well,
No, stay over
for
here.
the moment, I'll hold this. Well, this is one story. I'll give it a little background. I was born in western Kansas in an Eurocentric community in which there were no African Americans, no Hispanics, no Native Americans, nothing but a group of immigrants, all German immigrants that were Protestant. And the diversity that we experienced, diversity being a more operative word today than back then, was non-existent. And therefore, I grew up in this atmosphere of stories about the other, you know. There was lots of conflict in the community, but it was all religious conflict toward the Volga Germans, which occupied the areas off to the south, and you can name all of the surrounding threats to our community, but people were threatened to the extent that they told stories, and they were not nice stories. So that was my early education, and it was necessary to leave home to begin to experience what the world was really like. And there I met people of new ethnic groups, religious groups, racial groups. And what did I discover? Well, I discovered that, gee, people are pretty much alike. I mean, they're in your people are in your classes, diverse people, and gee, what have I been learning? They're all quite alike. Well, here's my story. It begins here in Manhattan, Kansas, in 1962, in November. Remember, 1962 is 2 years before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I was in my 8th year of continuous higher education at that time. No, I was not a slow learner. It's just that that's how long it takes for academic progress in our system. Our research group here at K-State was diverse. We had a young African-American from North Carolina, his wife being a part of the picture, and his father was a tobacco farmer in North Carolina. He was a graduate of Morehouse University in Atlanta, and he was one of the original students who sat in at the lunch counters in Georgia in the early 1960s. He was part of the Martin Luther King inspired action during that time. And we didn't appreciate that at the time, that, geez, that was pretty scary stuff. You did that. Well, only today do I appreciate it. Well, we had many other groups, many other people in our group, Asian, Hispanic, you name it, we were happy. And we were a happy bunch. I mean, gee, we didn't care what color people were. We were all in there fighting the same common enemy, the faculty. And we were just happy to make it through those tough courses and move on the steps of our education, and we were all good friends. Well, in November of 1962, 12 graduate students from K-State, 3 professors, 2 of them are known to this congregation, Jack Lambert and Francis Lanning, think of those last names. We all hit the road for a road trip to Houston, Texas. 1962, 3 carloads, 3 professors, 12 graduate students of all descriptions. And one of the cars was driven by Cleon Arrington, our African-American student from North Carolina, had a brand new Pontiac Super Sport because his wife had a great job in Topeka at the prison, youth prison. Well, so we were a happy bunch. Before we got to Dallas, where we had to spend the night, Cleon said to us, when we find a place to stay, a motel, I'm going to drop all you guys off, and then I will take my car and I'll go off and I'll stay someplace else. We said, what are you talking about? I mean, you're not going to do that. You're going to stay with us. You're one of us. Well, he agreed. Okay. It was after dark, and the professors went in to engage the motel. It was really a nice one. And we all went into the motel units that they had rented and began to unpack. A knock came on the door. It was the manager. He walked in and he said, the rest of you may stay, but he has to go, pointing at the African American. Now, how did he know that he was an African American and not a foreign student? Because we had a foreign student from Bombay, India, that was so black that it made me look white, very white. And he can stay, but he has to go. Well, we were just astonished. We had no context for understanding what this was about. And so he said, I will leave. He said, there is a book. I have a book in my car. It's called the Green Book, that tells where African Americans can stay when they travel. Hotels, motels, restaurants. And I will leave. I will go and stay at one of these places. I told you so. Well, we said no. So the manager gave us our money back. And we left. Well, what are we going to do now? Well, we went on, we said, gosh, we're hungry. We got to eat. So we stopped at a Bob's Big Boy. Remember them? Bob's Big Boy, a big hamburger. And we were wise by this time. The professors went in and talked to the manager and said, are we welcome here? And we have an African American with us. We are very hungry. The manager said, yes, you are welcome here. This was Dallas. So we walked in, the waiting room was filled with about 50 people waiting for a table, and every seat in the restaurant was filled. We walked in, they all walked out. They all got up and left. So there we were left, 15 of us and a few waitresses, our exclusive access to the restaurant because everybody else walked out. Well, I'm not going to belabor the story because it just continued. I didn't think we were going to reach Houston alive as we traveled through the rest of Texas and tried to eat. But there's one bright part to the story. When we got to Houston, we checked into the finest hotel, no problem. We went to the Playboy Club. Our African-American student had a Playboy key. We all, and Frank says he had one too. And so we did that, and we went to what I thought was the finest restaurant in Houston, where I had lobster thermidor. I will never forget that. But Houston was a completely different world. Dallas was a disaster. And ever since then, every time I go to Dallas, I have a bad experience. It is ordained, it is written in the record of history that when Brice goes to Dallas, something bad is going to happen. Well, I have many other stories. My personal journey is one of enlightenment. Despite my beginnings, one learns over a lifetime that the world is a very different place and it is becoming more diverse all the time. One final comment. In 1987 and 88, when John Weefald and Jim Kaufman came to K-State, one of the ideas they proposed is that the faculty at K-State lacked diversity, experience, and training. Therefore, we will hold diversity classes for every faculty member at K-State. Well, it was like the proposal to get rid of architecture and design and human ecology. There was a revolt. It wasn't a nonviolent revolt. The faculty revolted and said, no, we will not. Okay, everybody sign up for your diversity training session. The faculty refused. Well, that's just one more bump in the road as far as enlightenment, because you find today that diversity is a very significant topic almost everywhere. And what does it really mean? Well, when we are diverse, we forget about being against someone because we know them. To know someone is to love them. And that is part of our message here. And so diversity is considered one of those woke activities, which means progressive activism. It's one of those things that is being those four-letter words that one part of our political culture today talks about, but it isn't woke. It makes sense. It's the only thing that's going to work and allow us to treat each other with respect and with love. So I'm going to stop and let Sarah add to this, and then maybe we'll talk a little later.
Yeah, you guys start thinking if you have any comments or things you'd like to share with us with your experiences. Now, I read what Brice wrote, and he didn't say the things that I expected him to say exactly, because I was going to rib him a little bit. In his original writing, he had said that the man from India was blacker than the ace of spades. And I asked him, I said, why did you say that? Why did you choose that? And you said, I don't know. And I thought, that's what we talk about today. We talk about the things that we do that are unconscious, that we don't know why we do them, but they're insulting and they're aggressive, microaggressions, macroaggressions. But that's what the conversation today is a lot about: endemic racism and systematic racism. I read a lot of the Green Book after Brice mentioned it in his story. And in the 1949 issue, there was an essay that describes a bus trip from New York to Greenville, South Carolina, and Savannah. About the return trip, they wrote, quote, "Speeding north through Dixie, you do not open the coach windows now for a breath of fresh air and an eye full of cinders." The burning crosses, perhaps, that they had to drive through. Just a little code, maybe, that today we understand very clearly and that others would have understood too. Also, in what you wrote, you said, culture seems to be the defining cause of misunderstanding and difference. And this made me think about, I saw this in the Soul Matters material for this month. It said, we need to remember that achieving a balance of equality requires us to be purposefully off balance and out of step with our culture. Or, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, we need people who are maladjusted to the way things are. This got me thinking about, how am I maladjusted? What is my experience? And in preparing for this, I thought a lot about myself. And I started journaling, about the first time I knew I was white. Brice and I had talked a little bit about that. And I was writing about me and my regrettable white privilege, me realizing I too am a victim of white supremacy. Black, brown, biracial, triracial, white anecdotes with me, the topic of conversation, the center of attention, and the main character. I had written a blanket condemnation of white privilege, and I thought I'd flagellated racism. Done. Get it. I'm ashamed. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. See, I'm trying. The author of The Sum of Us, Heather McGhee, she observed of white people talking about racism. Conventional white racism on the one side, Confederacy, and a blanket condemnation of white privilege, or an obsession with various symbolic battles. When I found Brice's comment, blacker than the ace of spades, I was pleasantly shocked. I was proud I had caught his error. And by focusing on what could be changed, how can I fix your diction, I won a symbolic battle. A symbolic battle. And that would be a good deed for the day, maybe even for the year. I've done it, taken care of the racism thing. My father said to me when I was very young, 5 or 6 years old, he said, "Too bad you were born a woman. Be glad you're not black." Even better, I wish I'd said, I was cast as the first world white woman with civil rights, self-supporting with a bank account and a home of her own. who could even choose to be a man. But I'd never know what it was like to be Black. I told Brice about a man at work a few months ago who said, quote, "I heard Indians can't get COVID." I said politely, "That's racist, you know." When I really wanted to say, with even better aplomb, "You are a racist." When we can overtly talk about race and not hush and put it, "Oh, we don't talk about that." When we can put the words Black and brown in our sentences, that's when we bring the discussion to the table. That's where we decenter ourselves and bring the people that we really are talking about to the center of the conversation. I'll finish with another thing that I read in the 1949 Green Book. There will be a day sometime in the near future when this guide will not have to be published. That is when we as a race will have equal opportunities and privileges in the United States. It will be a great day for us to suspend this publication, for then we can go wherever we please and without embarrassment. But until that time comes, we shall continue to publish this information for your convenience each year. The Green Book ceased publication in 1967. That was the year I was born.
A reaction or two. I have a hunch that that statement in the Green Book about close the windows on the bus because so the cinders don't get in was maybe a mixed metaphor in a sense about Black people being forced to ride in the rear cars of a train on the railroad. And at that time, why trains were almost always steam engines and spit out cinders, which trailed all the way back and landed in the rear cars of the rail cars. So I think they maybe have that a little mixed up, and it's a mixed thing. That was my reaction to that.
We're going for that, for sure. Would anyone like to share their thoughts on the conversation today?
Hi, I'm Kathleen Oldfather, and my father was a traveling salesperson and would always leave Monday morning and come back Friday night. And I remember one night his arriving home with his suitcase, and my mom said that Dr. King was killed today, and my dad said, "Good." And I was about, I don't know, 9 or 10. And I just remember as a child thinking, how can this be good? And it was, it probably tuned me into this stuff for the rest of my life, you know, to right that wrong that I heard. And as John Extell has pointed out in the past, that my public education probably really helped me to learn a lot about discrimination and racism, and we had a good public school. And well, the good part of the story is that I believe that my father voted for Barack Obama for president. So even in his life, he did enough, was exposed to enough to change and come to that decision. But I just find it interesting how just in my lifetime, things change so much.
Okay. The antipathy toward King in his lifetime was tremendous. If you recall, J. Edgar Hoover was a leading factor in that, I believe, in that he kept an extensive dossier on King and claimed to have all kinds of things that he would reveal if King didn't desist. And so I just recall that King was reviled by white people in his lifetime, and that's very unfortunate.
So hearing your stories reminds me about how naive I was until well into adulthood, probably still am. But I grew up in a town without any diversity at all. Well, there was one Jewish family, and we were all very aware of that. But when I went off to college, I thought I became sophisticated and worldly, and I had Black friends, and all was well. In 1961, Thad and I and our baby Julie went to visit my sister in Itabena, Mississippi. And when we got there, she quickly opened the garage door and said, "We took the car out, you keep your car in there and we'll keep the door closed," because we had Connecticut license plates. And she said, "It won't be safe for you here." And we thought, that's absolutely ridiculous. And later in the day, a neighbor visited and they said, "Have you put their car away? You know, that this won't be safe." And that was the feeling of the town, that anyone coming down from the north was not going to be safe there, because we were going to disrupt their usual way of doing things. And I learned that I was wrong. It was not ridiculous that she had put our car in her garage and hidden us.
I wonder how many of you know that the Green Book had an entry for Manhattan, Kansas. Yeah.
John Extel. I've been involved with two organizations in Manhattan. Over the years, the Manhattan Alliance for Peace and Justice and the Coalition for Equal Justice. And we've done the research on the Raleigh County Police Department's practices, which show clearly that if you are African American in our community, you are over 5 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than if you are white, even though all the studies show that Black and white people use marijuana at roughly the same degree. So we have good evidence, solid evidence in our community that racism is a problem in the police department. We have a new director of the RCPD, however, right now, who's African American. So maybe he can help us get reduce this discrepancy. Anyhow, I have the study with me today with a graph that shows the statistics and how we arrived at those conclusions. That over the decade or so, over 5 times more likely for a Black person to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person.
So, given what we've known that John, among others, has taught us, given that this racial disparity in application of justice exists, what do we do about it? Now, one approach that Sarah kind of pushed is we just flat out say to the police, "You're racist." Now, in my experience teaching, not about racism, teaching about physics, simply telling a student, "You're wrong," is not always the most useful way for the student to learn something. somehow or another, to learn a new idea, you've got to some extent, create it yourself. You've got to discover the way to solve a particular physics problem, for example. Now, how does this play out with racism? I've told this story before, so please bear with me. Several years ago, when I was out for a morning jog, it was about 9:15 or something like that. And as I was jogging, a young black woman got out of her car and headed for the door. And like Brice and the Ace of Spades, just into my head popped that she's probably late for work. But I caught myself a few strides later and was appalled at my immediate reaction. And so I went on a self-education program that persists to this day, of noticing people doing things, white people doing things, black people doing things. And they're the same things. So I discovered that I was racist by that remark, and in part because it was my discovery and not somebody telling me, Weaver, you're racist. In part because it was my discovery, I've been able to do a little vaccination of myself in this matter by persistently noting people doing things. Now, this is just my approach. It's been my experience that trying to help people discover things for themselves is the most useful way. But that's a slow process. And maybe what's needed is more nearly the "you're a racist" revolution to solve the problems. All I can say is that that's not my way.
Yeah, I'd like kind of second your experience. It brought to mind 60 Minutes, very early in 60 Minutes, the story of a Jewish family who moved into a town in Nebraska. The first Jewish family that has ever been there. And there was an active Ku Klux Klan presence in that town.
They've been coming on Zoom.
And when they found out that the Jewish family had moved in, they started harassing them.
Is this wife?
And the
I have their phone number. I'm going to call him.
father of the family found out who the
there's
Grand Dragon or whoever it was, the head of the chapter was, and that he was leading this harassing. And so
maybe not.
Found out his phone number and he called him up. He said, "Why are you doing this to us? We come here, we want to be part of this community." He says, "We're not so much different from you. Come have supper with us." And he was You mean you're not frightened? Why should we be frightened? You're a human being. We are human beings. So anyway, what the upshot was that the guy did come to dinner. And had a very pleasant meal. And what wound up happening was that he renounced, the guy who was the head of the Ku Klux Klan, renounced eventually, after he got to know this family, his attitudes. The Klan chapter fell apart, and this family became prominent in the town. And I kind of think that is the way that any of these things, any of these elements that separate us die. It's not being called out necessarily, as it is just becoming aware that deep down we are all people.
Thanks everyone for the discussion. And I think we'll just go ahead and we'll close out and move on to coffee and conversation today. Again, let me see if I had something else to say to you. No, I think you're free to go. Thank you all for being here, and please have a wonderful week.